Hey Axis and Allies players, the good captain here. This will be a quick review of round 10 and a recap of my game with this opponent, Ragnell. He played a fine game, but it appears that the curtain has drawn here. I will go over what happened in Austria-Hungary's turn. The dice were unkind to someone who deserved much better. This attack by the Austrians into Tyrolia was an uphill attack. So here's the deal. The Austrians attack with 48 infantry, 14 artillery, and 2 fighters versus what is that? 64. Anyway, 60 something Entente infantry and 10 artillery. Comes out to something like an 8-piece tub swing, an 8 infantry swing in favor of the Entente. That is a pretty rough attack, but theoretically speaking, it doesn't get better. So I completely, at least on round 10, being the Austrians, I would do the same thing. If I entered this game at this point right now, I don't think I would do a darn thing different. I think that was the right move given the board state. Unfortunately, the CP rolled -10. The expected hits was 27 or 28, and I think they pulled 18. Yes, 18. This was set up. This was almost going to be the worst roll I've ever seen, but the Entente rolled -4, so it ended up being a total of 6 over par for the Entente. Okay, 6 over par. So it was not just an 8-piece swing, it was actually a 14 or a 15-piece swing, and that is what I might categorize as a catastrophic result for the CP. And my opponent started making overtures at this point, but like a true gentleman, actually in the finest traditions of the U.S. Navy, offered to keep going for as long as it would be helpful to support this channel. So thank you very much. That is very kind of you. And also on condition that Constantinople fell. And let's just continue. So the Russians don't do anything much. That was really all that was interesting for the Austrians. The Russians moved to Burgundy, right like that, centralizing themselves. The Germans captured Alsace in force. The French didn't do anything spectacular. We stack up in Belgium, and we are now siphoning our troops purely to the north to create a overly competitive army. We're basically going to use the British as shields, which for the most part they do, right? We put 2 in Lorraine, put meat shields in front of the French army. We're lethalizing the French, right? Fruit Loops are good for defense, but not good for the attack. So over-strengthening or overpowering or focusing on building up the British army is what's going on here. And the same is essentially true with casualties on the Italian front. I prioritized French and American, except I balked, just given how poor the CP dice roll was. I decided to keep the American artillery around and pair it with the infantry. That's a luxury of experience, I guess you might call it. So when we get to the British turn, I also ordered all units into Constantinople. The British rolled exactly par. The CP rolled something like -5 here as well. So these aren't, I've seen worse rolls, but the consistency is not sustainable for a side that is incredibly brittle. The CP on a good day might be able to absorb 1 and maybe 2 of these types of battles on a good day, like when you're doing well otherwise strategically, you haven't made a wrong move anywhere, etc., etc. They're just not as robust as the Entente. The Entente can eat this kind of stuff, in 3 or 4 battles and still keep battling away, but not so with the CP. Okay, so ostensibly this is the end of the game, and so now I'm going to go over what I think my opponent did well and I'm going to speak as somebody who is not claiming yet to be an expert. I'll change my tune a little bit when I release my series on 1914 on the other channel, out of necessities that I won't go into here. But just as somebody who has played 30 plus games, I think this is my 32nd or 33rd, 34th maybe even, and will probably continue to do so for the next couple months at least, I would have done a few things differently. But first, what I liked. Obviously, I talked about what I liked about the Ottomans, but let me just ram this point home. If again, if I'm playing this board in the turns that my opponent was playing them, in other words, the Ottomans for that turn that he did that move, yeah, I wouldn't have thought of that. But yeah, given that if that was shown to me as an option, I would have absolutely taken that because we need something to stick, and hurling low odds probability events at the board to see if it sticks is the right move at this point in the game. Also, moving against Russia, understanding that KRF is the only viable strategy as the CP, and that's okay. I don't think that's a criticism, but something to decode about the game. KRF is the way to go. If anybody says otherwise, they haven't played enough, or perhaps they're using the tournament rules, and I'm not going to bark up that tree, probably ever. But at any rate, I do have a few notes. Okay. Uh, First and most simple is tanks. I'm gonna switch games here. This is a currently ongoing game against a different opponent. I am the CP, and we don't care about anything on the board except for the Ankara, Syrian Desert, Arabia, Mesopotamia, Persia, India area. These 6 territories, right? These 6 territories. I am going to run this calculation in real time. Hopefully everyone can see, but if not, I'll just announce this. We are preparing trying to prepare a legitimate defense of Mesopotamia and to hold it as long as possible against the Brits. Standard Ottoman basic stuff, 101 basic stuff for me, at least for me. Okay, I think this is solid Axis and allies for what we're doing on this part of the board as this faction. So currently it's 31-4 against 28-4. But it's yeah, right, and this is it's going to be the British turn next. So the board state as it is now is -3 pieces in favor of the Ottomans. So if the British attack, they'll lose 3 more pieces. It'll be attrition, right? But they'll lose 3 more than the Ottomans if it goes centerline bell curve. And I'm willing to eat that. That's why I've set this up this way on purpose. I think that's acceptable. That's an acceptable ramp. But the way I look at these things is what's coming behind it. And this is where I'm going to get into a discussion about armor. What's coming behind India is 12 infantry. So I want to add 12 to the British attack because the British are going to go before the Ottomans. So on the British turn, they're going to have 43 and 4. Their transports are out of the equation, right? They're too far away. Just take my word for it. They're down there. They're too far away. So that is, it needs to be reinforced because there's a positive TUV swing. So I've planned to reinforce it with 5, 6, 7 infantry and 1 artillery, okay? 7 infantry and 1 artillery. And boom, there we have it. Back to -9 TUV swing, something like that, okay? So I'm maintaining the status quo with this methodology. This is the point I want to ram home right now, okay? I am going to take out 2 infantry and add in 1 armor. In other words, I'm changing my opponent's purchase. He saw what I had on defense, and his response was to build 12 infantry. This is not correct. When we take out 2 infantry and we add in 1 armor, which is the cost, watch what happens to the TUV. -7. Let's do it again. 39. Watch what happens to the TUV. Right there where my cursor is. Okay, now we're under 2 pieces. We went from 3 pieces to less than 2. We can continue to do this if we want to, but tanks save your TUV, and that means you have more pieces at the front. Tanks are lethal, and I don't know how else to just ram this thing home. Uh, I think I would have purchased a few tanks as both CP powers. I usually do. On the turn of that they become available. I'm only mentioning this. This isn't a criticism of my opponent. Many opponents do this. I've got 9, so I can't say many. I've played against 9 different opponents. I'd say 3 or 4 of them, when I'm playing against them, just seem to avoid tanks as the CP. I'm trying to remember now how many CP opponents, how many people have been brave enough to take the CP, but it's been more than this fellow, more than one. And yeah, as you can see, there's a positive effect. The argument for not building tanks is, yeah, but if I don't build a tank, it means I have 2 attackers instead of 1 attacker. But it's not about, it's not really, it's about preserving the pieces that matter, and the pieces that matter most are the pieces that are doing the fighting up in the front. That's one element of it. The rest, I haven't really done a complete dissection of what's going on with these results. All I know is that you can see what I can see. It positively affects the TUV. And keeping more pieces up at the front, turn to turn, is one thing. The other thing is that they pay for themselves after 2 battles, right? After 2 battles, they've automatically start saving you money. Okay, that's enough of that. The next thing I probably would have done differently is the handled the I've kind of put myself into a pigeonholed myself into a certain strategy, and that's only because it seems to bear the best for game to game, and I do not risk what I call core units, and that's namely these artilleries here. This battle was an uphill fight. I think it was -2 pieces in favor of the Entente. So, and then it was unfortunate that actually I forget. I thought we had a fighter battle, but anyway, it doesn't really matter, right? The CP attacked, the French counterattacked. Yeah, right. Okay, there we go. And now the Germans have a skeleton force on the West Front, but those pieces, again, just speaking from my experience and nothing else, I can be wrong still. I'm not asserting this. I'm not demanding anything from anybody listening or my opponent. Um, in my experience, those pieces are better left alive, and I can steel man the argument from the other side. You don't want the French to get out of control, right? Like if the CP doesn't do that, then there's too many French, and it just becomes a slogging slugfest. That that's a fair point. That is a fair point. It is difficult to fight a large set piece battle when there's that many pieces, but in my experience, you get a better deal when armor is in play and when you're more towards the mid game, when the German economy has its full attention on the West Front. It seems abstract, but it just once Germany's full economic might is swinging down here, these battles actually go more in favor of the Germans, in my experience. You can actually outproduce since you can outproduce the French. Yes, the British can reinforce. There's inadequacies of multinational forces. I've gone over a few, hopefully, of the inadequacies. I call it Fruit Loop defense. You can play against that. There are things you can do to kind of manipulate that to your favor. But yeah, I think that hurt. I think that hurt too much. So again, I appreciate the fact that that could have gone the other way. I do understand that. Let me take a pause and say I could have lost that air battle. I could have gotten diced as the French. Yeah, and perhaps we'd be singing a different tune. I just don't think it's necessary to do as the German player. I think you can get a better deal later, and I just personally, in my experience, would probably have deferred that attack. Okay. Uh, this one is probably the most interesting piece to me in this game. So I kind of have this commitment to just building infantry, but something happened over here, and I'm going to try to find out when. I didn't. I felt the Russians didn't get enough respect in the air, and it has to do with a very specific component of how this game works. So apparently on turn, yes, here it is. All right, here we are at the end of Ottoman round 3. It looks like the CP are pushing air units to the west already. This is very early to be doing this in my experience. And where is it coming from? It's coming at the cost of air units on the east front. So as the Russian player, there is not as the Russian player. There is one thing that I notice after playing many, many games about being rammed up against your capital. Whatever you produce instantly becomes relevant. And so if you're attacking someone's capital, you kind of have to consider every possibility. What if this guy produces all artillery? How does that change things? What if this guy produces all infantry? Is kind of boring, but in this case, what if this guy pops 2 fighters into existence? Now, uh, I hope I've explained in a previous video. If I haven't, having one more fighter when you're even 10 fighters versus 9 fighters, you should you, the gap in who wins that is large. Whoever has one more is generally going to get the upper hand, like at or above 67%, at or above a bomber's ability to get a hit in regular Axis and allies. I mean, it's usually that significant. So now what the Russians have here is nearly air superiority, almost guaranteed air superiority, because the CP only have one each, right? So they'll have to combine, and then think of it inverted. They have to combine to protect themselves against this quite significant number of artillery that the Russians have. Now, I'm not inclined to do this as the Russian player. I only did this because this opportunity presented itself. I knew I could snap my fingers and take air superiority, and so I did. And that, uh, yeah, we got bear hugged. I like the bear hug. This is pretty good. Almost a complete bear hug. The Russian bear hug. uh, let's go ahead and skip ahead. The Ottomans come up. I've seen this in a few games. Yeah, that's cute. That can be helpful. Um, and then I still felt like I wasn't getting a ton of respect out of the. It's not the right word, but you know, hopefully it comes across what I mean. I see this build up. I see it coming, but it might be too late. So I think the CP should probably dump most, if not all, of their air assets, into Russia to just deter the Russian player from doing what I did here, because I do attribute uh, the ability to do what I did, which is perhaps another aspect of. Uh, I've just never done something like this, and I feel like I was only capable of running the Russian army out of Moscow because of this air superiority thing. I mean, it's painful not having. I mean, it activates. It adds 1 point to all of your artilleries, and it takes away a point of all your enemies. And there's so much artillery in play over here that air superiority really matters. So those are my thoughts. Let me see if I got any else. No, I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. So I'll just touch up by saying the I don't know how deadly this was, but I've had something like this happen to me, where the Russian army kind of squeaks out in force like this, and I just tapped because it was already I've kind of been in this game before, and I've lost this as the CP much in the same manner here before. So things were slightly different, but as mentioned earlier, I kind of had this experience where um, my opponent just backed out of Moscow, and I know enough about playing the CP that it is extraordinarily painful. Just to go into Moscow is sometimes a head scratcher. Like, just to take and plunder the capital is sometimes like, oh my god, do I really want to do this? Dot, dot, dot. And being forced to kind of. And so, I ran British up there because I kind of understood the value of what we call mobility killing in the army. We call it mobility killing your enemy. Uh, Pulling them so far out of position says every turn forward is a turn back as well. So the deeper you go, the worse it gets, almost exponentially. Imagine if you were in this position and on the very next turn, this massive Austrian army can just turn right around And so, what would I do differently? As the CP player, you know, I'm tempted to kind of wait until the release of my videos. I do have a formula as the CP, and one as the Russians, but uh, I think I might put a pin in that actually. I think I've just kind of got to sit on what I think. I could explain it in a few sentences, but I just am not confident enough to publish that even on this channel. So I'll hold it there. I'll table that for now. Uh, but yeah, I will extend. Uh, Let me extend a proper handshake to my opponent. Anybody who takes the CP has balls. I mean, it is not easy to play this. It is not intuitive, and Ragnell might be more doggedly persistent than I am in cracking how to play these factions. They are brittle, they are unforgiving, and uh, mad respect, mad respect for anybody who saddles up with the CP. Um, I will say that I have checked and I've played apparently 12 games as the Entente. I have not lost any. And Ragnell is going to be the person who does defeat me. I know it doesn't, it might, I, I don't know how anybody feels about when they see this game, but Ragnell, buddy, you're on the right track, and I look forward to taking an L as the Entente from you someday. So, uh, to be continued possibly, but we'll definitely have more games going in the future, hopefully, with this opponent. And yeah, I think that's all I'll say for right now. So thanks again. Thanks for watching this. All the best from the good captain, and bye-bye.